So welcome on behalf of the University Career Center, the Employability Program at the University Career Center, the University of Maryland Autism Research Consortium, and the Cigna program here at the University of Maryland. We welcome you to our Autism and Career Development panel. We're very fortunate today to have extremely distinguished guests. I will introduce them now, but hopefully they'll tell you a little bit more about what they do when they begin their presentations. We have with us Andrew Eddy, who is the founder and the director of Untapped. Untapped is far and away the global leader in designing, implementing, and researching autism hiring programs in both the private sector and government. We have also with us Teresa Thomas, who is the program lead for neurodiverse talent enablement at the MITRE Corporation. And Teresa also leads the neurodiverse federal workforce pilot program, both of which you'll hear more about coming up. And we also have with us Nina Agrawal, who is a rising junior in computer engineering in the Clark School at the University of Maryland, and Nina is a member of the Cigna program here on campus. We also have in the audience a number of other members of Cigna, as well as the program lead, Kathy Dalberger. So if we should have questions related to Cigna later on, we have lots of expertise to deal with those. Teresa, maybe I can ask you to start. You're going to share your screen and then take it away, right?
So, yes, and if this doesn't share, you'll all be very lucky. All right, I'm going to share my screen. All right. Well, fortunately or unfortunately for you, Zoom always seems to work properly. All right, can you see?
Yes.
Fabulous. All right, so I'm going to walk you through really quickly and high level a couple of programs that we're running from MITRE. Like Nancy said, my name is Teresa Thomas. I have been at MITRE for, I guess, getting close to 6 years now, and I am leading 2 programs out of MITRE that focus on, especially on autism hiring and support programs, eventually broadening out more into more of the neurodiversity field, but we're scoping with autism right now. We started with cyber roles. We are very quickly branching out of that, but it made it an easy sell. So that's where we started. So I'm going to tell you about the 2. I'm going to start with our federal facing program. So we are spearheading a pilot within 2 federal agencies to show them how to run autism hiring and especially support programs sort of based on the Autism at Work system, which I'll get into a little bit later when I talk about our own program internal to MITRE. And actually they're not in my teeny tiny little logo list here, but Untapped is actually a partner on that as well, which we're actually thrilled about because they actually know what they're doing. But we are actually starting in the next couple of weeks. They will be recruiting for this program. We have hired in a social services partner, Melwood, who's a local group, who will be doing the recruiting for us for this. We'll be recruiting for cybersecurity roles at one agency and data analysis roles at another agency. They are going to help us go through a vetting process. There'll be like a boot camp style situational assessment time, and those candidates will then, that are successful in that, will go on to work at these 2 agencies, at one of 2 agencies, for 6 months as interns. And at the end of that 6 months, it is expected that they will be hired in as full-time federal employees. All along the way, there'll be lots of training for the managers, for the coworkers at the agencies, and there'll be lots of support for the externs themselves and their managers. So built on the systems that companies like Microsoft and SAP and DXC are using, but customized for federal hiring, which is its own special, terrifying sort of, not terrifying, but it's a thing that's different than the rest of the world. And so we're trying to help agencies walk through what this looks like for them. We're really excited about it. The end goal is to put out a playbook like the one several of these other companies have put out, the Autism at Work playbook, it's called. This will be an Autism at Work playbook for the feds, probably 2 or 3 times longer than the original one, but so that any agency can pick it up and know how to run a program, how to really utilize autistic talent to help them shine and really succeed in their careers. So that's the goal of that. Do that with easier, less complicated job recs. Now, this is true for both programs. Simplify the job recs, adjust the interview process so that folks can really shine without having to do just the chit-chat, eye contact thing that can be so difficult for a lot of folks. Training up managers, coworkers, like I said, supports and job coaching, and then transition into the full-time employment and help with that. So that's that program. That's Neurodiverse Federal Workforce, NFW, because everything has to be an acronym. Internally to MITRE, and I didn't change the title on this slide. My bad, I made this deck 10 minutes before the program. But the internal program, let me get back here, is called the Portal Project at MITRE. And we just finished our first pilot round. Hello, Carlos and Sachin. We're both part of that, who are on the call today, which is very exciting. It is very similar to the federal program, but scaled way down. So look at me adjusting our slides on the fly. So it's a lot of the same sort of supports, but pared down, and a lot of those come from the universities. So we do some targeted recruiting at a handful of schools, and we identify, and the schools help us identify qualified students. We do some specialized interviews. Now, they look a lot more like the typical interview, but we send you all the questions ahead of time. We tell you exactly how it's going to go when we get on the phone. We allow lots of time for processing and thought and let you get out what you need to get out, and we will help draw out what you really know. Because a lot of times students have trouble feeling like they really know the things they know, and if it's a hobby, they don't think they really know it. Hint, you do. If you're doing it on the side, you probably know it better than most of the folks who've been trained. So those are the kind of specialized interviews we do there, and then we do a lot of training for the managers and coworkers again, and build in some support along the way. And I don't know, we did not ask ahead of time, but if either of you guys want to say anything about how that went or what it was like, I would welcome that. Carlos or Sachin, either one. I'm going to count to 7 because that's my thing. All right, you can say something later. Right now we are targeting schools that we know have really strong programs. University of Maryland is one of those, clearly. Mercyhurst, George Mason, RIT, and Drexel are some of the others that I used to go to at least once a year and meet with students. We'll be doing more things like this today, getting to know some of the students. And then from there, we work with the folks that are running those autism support programs to recruit and support the students. What that looks like internally, ideally, all of these, some of these are acronyms you won't recognize. This is an internal document, but the department heads, the program directors, the human resource partners, managers, team peer mentors, these folks are all trained up so they know what's going on so they can be helpful. And then we ask the schools to help support the students and reach out to them at least once a week, make sure everything's going okay, and to roll in those family supports if they need them. Normally we do not have a summer internship program. Right now we are running during the school year. So we work with a lot of co-op schools. You probably saw that in the list. And then our students out of University of Maryland were able to work part-time and be in school part-time. Or I think Sachin, I think you did full-time and we're in school part-time. So we try to be flexible on that. Hopefully next summer we'll be able to do some summer interns, but I am trying to get my managers trained up before that so that they know what they're doing before the swirling mayhem of 500 interns comes in every summer. I think it was actually 700 last year. So those are the two programs. And I am going to put up my address here. I don't have like an application form. Like I said, we're working really tightly with the universities. So if you're interested in working for Mite or talk to Nancy, she's your in. And she actually probably will be as well for the federal program. That should start recruiting in the next couple of weeks. There will be a web page for that through Melwood. And Nancy, once again, is your source of all knowledge on that one. So that's it. Nancy, you are muted. Yep.
I clicked it. Thanks very much, Teresa. I appreciate not only this presentation, but how closely you've worked with us and how supportive you've been of our students. I know that both Sachin and Carlos had amazing experiences and were immensely rewarded by the time they spent at MITRE. So.
Well, us too. So we're thankful for you guys.
So Andrew, can we ask you to take it away? And then Nina, when Andrew is done, we'll ask you to step up, okay? So, and
yeah, sure.
Sure. Let me see if I can do this as well. Can you see that?
yes.
Now, can you see, is that on a full screen or just
No,
partial?
not in presentation mode, it's just.
Okay, now presentation mode. How's that? Fantastic. Okay. So, yes, so thank you for the opportunity, Nancy. Yes, so Andrew Eddy, founder director of Untapped, and driving the Neurodiversity Hub initiative. Sorry, I'll just skip a slide. So I'm not sure if everyone's totally familiar with neurodiversity, but it was a term coined by an Australian psychologist back in 1998 as part of her PhD, and she was really putting forward the concept as something that described everybody in the world, and that we all were different, we all had different wiring and different ways of thinking. But in the last 5 years or 10 years or whatever, it's come to more specifically refer to a group of people with different wiring that we've put labels on, like autism and ADHD and dyslexia and so on. But more and more I'm seeing that that definition is expanding and back to including other variations and even things that can be, have been acquired, like PTSD and so on. So it's something that we've got to recognize and look at how we can do things differently to accommodate all these amazing people. So Untapped, a social enterprise that does a whole lot of things. We're really about bringing together organizations that are passionate about integrating neurodiverse individuals into the workplace, creating this sustainable neurodiverse employment ecosystem, and at the end of the day, realizing a whole lot of untapped talent. And when I talk about ecosystem, this is the sort of thing we're trying to put together. And I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
So really looking at identifying organizations that can see the opportunity of going further in diversity, into neurodiversity, identifying commercially compelling opportunities to bring in resources, neurodiverse resources, going through this assessment process, but not just employing them, having actually a whole program where we scaffold and develop them. We identify their strengths, help them identify their strengths, help them with their self-advocacy, look at this career progression that they will go through. We're also working with the organisation to make sure there's a meeting in the middle there with training of the people in the organisation and looking at workplace assessment and work design to make sure it's appropriate. So we've had some good success with getting this interest, and what it leads you to is to say, well, how do we create the pipeline of talent? And that was this idea behind the Neurodiversity Hub, to really look at putting together a co-curricular program that covered everything from well, I'll come to that later, but really covering a whole lot of things that would help students succeed and get jobs. We've also then been linking with human services organisations as a source of candidates for the program, and really is also an opportunity around research, which we're very focused on ensuring that there's some research underpinnings of all the things we're doing. In terms of learnings out of all of this, what we've seen works the best is having multi-year programs. So we're not just employing people and hoping for the best. There's actually a multi-year program within the organisation. That it's a team-based approach, so that we're bringing in teams of people so they can help support each other. There's that training of both the individual trainees and the organisation, and obviously appropriate consideration of accommodations. What's impacted us out of what's happening with COVID is, I guess we've demonstrated that we can continue with existing programs in a virtual sense. We've been able to show that we've transitioned the trainees to work from home with appropriate supports. Things like having, just a Zoom channel going while they're working periodically during the day, so they can have the feeling that they're still part of a team. Even though they're not having a formal meeting, they're still having that contact while they're doing their work. So it has been challenging, and some anxieties of maybe not having to travel to work anymore have been replaced by other anxieties, including things like how do some of them have felt that they need to demonstrate that they're still working even though they're at home. How do they demonstrate to their the company that they're still working? So some anxieties have been replaced by others, so it's needed an adjustment of how we work with them, but we have demonstrated that successful transition. The thing we've got to work on if we want to continue building these programs is how do we do this attraction, recruitment and onboarding, and selection and onboarding virtually. So a lot of the attraction and initial screening was done virtually, but we've now got to look at how we do selection and onboarding virtually. So that's something we're working through at the moment. And to that end, some of the tools we use to support that are Pymetrics, which is a screening tool using neuroscience games. We've got Life Sherpa as a smartphone app that provides executive functioning support. We've got Optimize as an e-learning tool to help neurotypicals understand more about how to work with the trainees. And we've developed some neurodiverse placemaking guidelines with some architects. And then of course, it's the use of the Neurodiversity Hub resources. And that's a great segue into the Neurodiversity Hub, which is really this community of practice that we've been fostering because we saw there were 3 areas that we were failing in this transition from school to work. And this is my experience because I was on the board of a university here in Melbourne for 9 years, as well as having a career in big business. So I was able to see both sides of this. But I guess what we're seeing is this lack of pathways of students from high school to university. It was just too big a jump, and they weren't feeling comfortable doing that. Their parents didn't see a safe journey or safe pathway for them. Even for those who got to university, they're often not getting through the first year because it's university is a big thing for anyone, and for those who are autistic, it can be a huge gulf to get across. And then even for those who made it through the university course, many times they didn't have work experience, so they didn't stack up against neurotypical peers. So when a hiring manager was coming to look at the people, they were taking a safe option and choosing a neurotypical who might have had a lot of work experience opportunities, whereas the neurodiverse person may not have. So our objectives for this Neurodiversity Hub is really providing, working with universities, because at the end of the day, the universities have the relationship with the student. But it's about providing the programs, skills and experience to help them become more work ready. It's about assisting students with getting that work experience and internships. Oftentimes we see their CVs are very lacking and not really stacking up. So it's really about how do we enhance that. And at the end of the day, we're really trying to increase those employment opportunities by creating that awareness amongst companies and making that work. And for employers, it's really about creating that pipeline of talent. So really helping them hone their skills and honing their CV so that it gets attention. But really creating this pipeline of talent that is typically creative, they're quick learners, task focused, attention to detail oriented, or problem solvers, but they just need that framework to make it happen. It's about giving access to training for those organizations so that they are better able to work with this cohort, and really recognize that it's also that many of their customers and suppliers will have neurodiverse people working in them. So it is really something that's right across the economy, and they need to be ready if they're going to be competing in this new world. And really creating this greater scale and sustainability for neurodiverse employment. We're working with a number of universities. We started in Australia, and that's all we were going to do. Really just focus on Australia, but we got some great interest from various universities in the USA and the UK, and it's just been a great journey to work with a whole group of people around the world. And that includes working with a whole lot of organizations that have come in, and some recent people have joined include Dell Technologies, who joined the other week. We've got VMware, SAP, BHP, which is a global resource company out of that started in Australia. GHD, which is a global engineering firm that started in Melbourne in Australia. So there's a whole range of organizations as part of this. So we've been through this quite a journey. We started off on the Neurodiversity Hub with a co-creation process. We refined the model with identifying some good practice examples at various universities and completing gap analyses between the model program and what we could see. And we've just been focusing on taking that program forward. Last year we did a phase 2 project where we took the theoretical model and put it into practice, and that had a range of things in it, which included transition to university. So we took some materials that had been developed through research at La Trobe University around transition to university and to college, implementing a peer coaching program that had been developed by Curtin University in Perth, and doing some thought pieces around disclosure at university and how that's something that you need to really think about in order to make sure you're getting the right supports. In terms of getting work ready, we've developed an employer expo survival guide, which is now being used by many universities for careers fairs and employer expos, guidelines for CVs, and then a financial literacy course that we've put together using existing materials from banks and so on. But we've also saw a gap around life skills, and we've put together a team of neurodiverse individuals in Australia, Canada, USA, UK, South Africa, all neurodiverse. They've designed, written, edited, and illustrated these materials, and it's called the Be Your Best Academy. This graphic on the left is done by a neurodiverse artist. This is part of the Eat Well program, really just showing the getting some information out there about good nutrition and this thing around colours and vitamins. So we've really focused on a whole range of things, but we saw being organized was a key foundation area of study. So we've nearly finished making those items available. The Eat Well cooking basics course is now out, and we're working on the presentation skills and the relationships course. So there's a number of other initiatives that we're working on as well. Sorry, gone too far. Yeah, other initiatives. So as I said before, we're working on a virtual selection workshop for our autism work programs so that we can cope with this current situation. We've focused also around recognizing there's a lot of autistic young adults who would like to start their own business and maybe be entrepreneurs. So we've been looking at curating resources into a separate section of the hub that supports them, and that should be up and running next week or so. We've also been working with companies around their entrepreneurship programs and how we can help them make those programs more inclusive and overtly inclusive neurodiverse employees in those programs. We've been given a grant from the Australian government to develop a cybersecurity attraction platform, and this is around creating some materials to help autistic young adults understand the opportunity of cybersecurity, get them to see if it's something they'd like to pursue, and then identify pathways for them through further study or employment to achieve that. Working with one of the universities here, they've developed a mental health toolkit for the use in autism work programs for managers and co-workers to support autistic trainees. And we're looking at strategies of how to roll that out at the moment. And we've also just recently launched a community of practice around the built environment. And this is around creating a separate section of the hub for architects and building designers to focus on making office space more inclusive. So that's the Neurodiversity Hub. There's a whole lot of stuff happening. Really encourage you to have a look at the resources that are there. It doesn't cost anything. It's all just there, available, and really powered by this community of practice. So if we talk about what can you do with all of this, I'm just going to talk a bit about what employers can do, because some of you may be employers or you may know people who are employers and you can hassle them about this. But really the opportunity is about becoming a partner in the hub, looking at your whole approach, the current approach you have to attraction, recruitment, and onboarding for neurodiverse, to become more neurodiverse friendly with this. The other thing we'd like people to consider is how they can sponsor programs at universities and colleges, really providing some funding to help those programs exist and go forward. There's also the opportunity to be a mentor or provide work experience or internships, and really hopefully go to the point eventually to establish an employment program. So encourage people to talk to companies about taking this on, because this is the future, and I think it's something that it has so many benefits and it's such a win-win, and we've seen such impacts on organizations from going down this track in terms of their engagement with their employers, engagement with suppliers and customers. It just really makes a difference. So I'll end there, but thank you very much for the opportunity. I think you're on mute, Anne.
Oh, I don't know why I click it in this. Anyway, I hope all of you are as overwhelmed and honestly moved as I am. Andrew, Untapped, and the Neurodiversity Hub have just been so incredibly generous with, with all of the resources that they're developing, and with their time to personally interact with me here at the university. But in addition, I think you see from Andrew's presentation that they see the whole program. They see everything from A to Z of what we need to really make our social world broadly conceived, inclusive of all people, including neurodivergent people. So thank you, Andrew. Personally, I appreciate your support and your partnership, and thank you for participating today.
No, thanks, Nancy. I enjoy working with you. Thank you.
Yep. But now we're going to hear from Nina, who's going to tell us about the boots on the ground perspective. So Nina, can I ask you to unmute and talk a little bit about the SIGNA program, the work that you're doing with other students on our campus, and anything else you think we need to know?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nancy. So, hi guys. My name is Nina Agarwal, and I'm a rising senior studying computer engineering. So I did the SIGNA program starting in my sophomore year. So SIGNA helped me a lot. Sorry, can everyone hear me first off?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, just let me know if I'm going too fast or you can't hear anything.
Okay, we'll use the chat. Thanks, Nina.
Yeah, of course. So I first joined SIGNA because with my freshman year of college, it wasn't awful trying to adjust, but it was difficult at first, not really having much support. So I started noticing that I was getting really stressed, and so I first heard about the SIGNA program freshman year, but it wasn't until sophomore year I thought, okay, maybe I should really get some help. So through SIGNA, they taught us how to make friends, taught me organization skills, self-advocacy skills, all without the whole thing of trying to make me normal, I guess, to look neurotypical. I was, I guess, taught to get along in the neurotypical world without completely becoming normal. So about a year after SIGNA, a friend and I, we decided, so SIGNA, I guess you could say, is a bit like a therapy group. They work on specific skills. But we wanted to have a space, like a support group for autistic students to connect with and support each other, I guess. So we started our own autism support group, which is led pretty much by autistic people for autistic people. And so this has been like our first year. We've had about 13 members join so far. And we're hoping to come back in the fall. It's going to be a little bit difficult with virtual learning, but we're hoping we can meet through Discord and use some online tools. So that's my spiel. Sorry I didn't prepare a PowerPoint or anything, but thank you guys for listening.
No, Nina, that was great. We didn't ask you to prepare a PowerPoint because I think what I'm really hoping is that people will take advantage of this opportunity to put questions to you. And, we really encourage people who are unfamiliar with neurodiversity or with autistic students on campus or autistic people at work. Don't be afraid, ask anything. Let's be bold here. Let's get any questions we have answered. Although it may be that our audience is already.
I see Miss DB as a question.
Yeah, so Nina, can you talk about being a peer mentor in SIGNA at this point?
Okay, so yeah, this fall I will be a peer mentor for students at SIGNA. So basically, at SIGNA, they kind of assign you a college student to kind of work with you on the goals that you work on in SIGNA. Okay. Is there a website to sign up? Yeah, if there's a, so on TerpLink, essentially for, if you go to terplink.com, you should be able to sign up. I can put a link in the chat if you want.
Yeah.
Can a college-age student who is not enrolled at UMD get involved in your group for autistic students? We haven't currently accepted students who aren't enrolled, but we can definitely look into that as a possibility. How can we support your group? Well, I can get back to you on that one, I suppose, but that's a really good question. Sorry, do you want me to keep reading these questions and answering them?
Let's see. I think the one on defining neurodiversity we can open up. Do you want to do you use the term, Nina? Do you use autism or do you use neurodiversity? Do you go back and forth? What's your thinking about that?
So our group is primarily for students with autism, but I guess I define neurodiversity as I guess anyone with a sort of what we consider mental disorders as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and also like anxiety and depression, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I'm also doing, go ahead.
You want to step in on that question of, how, I mean, how do you define neurodiversity?
Are you asking me?
No, maybe Andrew or Teresa can step in here too.
Yeah, sure. So it is that those variations we've discussed, but the one thing to remember is that often they're not, you know, even though we've got these labels, often people will have more than one of those variations anyway. And so it's very hard just to compartmentalize them that way. And I've seen people try and define them in terms of accommodations to say, well, if they're dyslexic, then this, and if they're autistic, then this. But when you actually put them together, you start to see conflicting things, conflicting accommodations. So at the end of the day, it really comes back to having the interaction with the individual and understanding the individual. And regards to the labels that you might put on them, what is it that they, you know, what is the way they like to work? What is the best way they like to study, and how do they, you know, what they want to do and what do they want to achieve, and what are the things that can support them doing that?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I think we have scoped our neurodivergence programs to autism as far as that's what we're focusing on for recruiting. But there's so much bleed over, and there's so much that overlaps, and not just in, you know, coexisting issues, but also in the solutions that are out there. They sometimes they conflict, but a lot of times clarity from your manager is going to be important for someone who's dyslexic, someone who's ADHD, and someone who's on the spectrum, right? So some of the things we're pushing through apply to everybody. But I tell people when I start conversations, usually when I say neurodivergent, I mean autistic, just to simplify things, but I just had a long conversation with a friend at work who's ADHD and really struggling. And so I know that we will be spreading out those things. I'm trying to slay one dragon at a time right now. So we're starting with just autism, knowing that that's not the only thing, and making sure we communicate that that's not the only thing.
Great, thanks. So here's an interesting question. Are these programs, and I'm assuming, let's talk about each of the three of them, inclusive of individuals who are certificate bound or only on the diploma track? So if you're a student at the University of Maryland currently, you are diploma bound. So certificate would be people from other backgrounds, other educational backgrounds. So can you speak to how you would involve other people outside, you know, the four-year campus in your programs?
I can start with that and say that we're not right now. That's another dragon I have to slay. The company I work at, MITRE, 60% of our folks have a master's or higher, and it's very highly valued. So working all that internally, but also I think both of the agencies we're working with federally require a college degree. One of them is willing to give on that for this program. One is absolutely not. And there was just an executive order out that says they have to accept candidates who are qualified, even if they don't have a college degree, unless they're required, you know, if you're being a doctor or something, of course you'll need something. But right now, that is another one of the dragons we're trying to slay, is people can be absolutely brilliant with the certificate. So all that being said, if you have a certificate or like an associate's, but especially a certificate in a CISSP or a cyber-specific certificate, that'll get you a long, long way, even without a college degree.
Andrew, do you want to talk about resources that you have available for people who are not at the four-year campus?
Yes, so we do have some materials, but they are around, as I showed you, some of the transition to university. There's some tools around supporting your success while at university, but other things are pitched at universities to say, here's the idea around a peer coaching program that you might want to implement. But that's reliant on the university to do that. But there's also things like the Employee Exposed Survival Guide, which is a 35-page guide for neurodiverse people to help them get through the trauma of the careers fair. And they've also got companion guidelines for employers and universities about how to design those events to make them more inclusive. So there's a whole range of things, and there's all then the life skills training. But really the technical side is really down to the university and working with them about how to make those accommodations, get to the point where students are willing to disclose in a controlled way to make sure they get the right support, the right accommodations. And we've even got thought pieces on the side about disclosure and about the pros and cons and how you need to be careful and mindful around doing that, just so that you get the right support, but you're obviously not just telling everybody. So there's those sorts of guides as well.
And those are all found on the Neurodiversity Hub, which is just
yes.
neurodiversityhub.org. So.
That's correct, yes. So if you go to the resources page, and then there's a section for students, for tertiary students, for secondary school, for employers, for universities, and then there's a separate section for architects and their community of practice.
Thank you. Nina, someone has asked you, have you had any experience with interviewing, and how did it go? And feel free to, the panelists are certainly welcome to exchange with one another.
Yeah, so I actually did have a internship at NIST. There wasn't an interview for that, thankfully, but it went pretty well. I actually developed an interest in artificial intelligence and machine learning. It wasn't a program specifically for autistic students, but I would say I think I did all right overall. I also wanted to ask Mr. Eddy something. What would you,
Sure.
How would you advise disclosing autism to employers, if you don't mind?
I think that's a very, it's a very hard question because it really depends a lot on the situation. But I would be, doing research on the company first of all to see if there's any sort of recognition from their website of neurodiversity, and then you've really then got to make a decision whether you're disclosing it right at the start, or whether you're not, whether you're holding it back and hoping for the best. It can be a really, really, really hard decision, and we've put some. We've had a thought piece written around that, written by a neurodiverse person around disclosure in the workplace, and that's also on the hub. And we don't advocate one way or the other. It's really going to be down to your personal situation, what you've been able to find out about the company, and what their attitude might be to that in terms of their profile or their image around understanding neurodiversity or disabilities or gender or whatever it is. So I can't advocate one way or the other, but it's just something that you need to really think about and how you would go about actually disclosing that, whether you do it in the interview, which some people advocate, or whether you do it at some point if you need to down the track, if you need accommodations. I've seen people, I've heard of people doing it when there might have been a change at work and they've gone through an office change and they've had that anxiety happening, and then they've then disclosed to say, well, I just need to work through this in a different way. But it does come down also to the manager you end up with and how they are and the relationship we can generate with them. So there's just so many factors in there.
Yeah.
And I'll say for the listeners, this is something that we at the Career Center do regularly. So September 11th, I'm doing a workshop on disclosure and accommodations. And, it's not even necessarily that you make a case to disclose or not to disclose. It's more like, in this situation with this employer for this job, do I disclose? So because there are so many factors that enter into a decision, I encourage you to attend the workshop, and we can lead you through a decision tree to help you figure out when, where, how, to whom, and why you would disclose.
Yeah, thanks. That sounds good. Thanks, Mr. Reddy. I really appreciate the answer. And thanks, Nancy.
No problem.
Teresa, did you want to jump in there?
I was just gonna say the same thing. I mean, unfortunately the answer is it depends. And I'm glad you guys are doing a workshop. I my gut is if you feel like it's not safe to disclose, you don't want to work there, but my gut has a job right now. So I can make that call, But I can tell you what our folks have done, the folks that I've met at MITRE who have disclosed. They have each done it locally with their manager one-on-one instead of during the interview. One of them didn't even know he was autistic until after he got the job. So that necessitated that. But the lady with autism that I talked to last week, she did not disclose at first and then had trouble after trouble after trouble, and finally disclosed to her immediate supervisor. And now she introduces herself as, hi, I'm Brandy, I work on the Air Force team and I have autism. Like she just is so out there with it just to clear that out of the air right at the beginning. So but she's been around long enough to know whether she can do that or not. So
we have a couple questions here about students on campus, but one of the questions concerns working remotely. And I know Andrew, that you have done some research on this as you've been running your program since COVID times. And Teresa, you're about to launch a program completely remotely. So can you talk about the factors that have entered into, thinking about the issue of working remotely?
Yes, so we've just broken it down when all this happened into some basic things that we thought the individual trainees should take on in order to make sure that they had the right framework. And it was just simple things like when you trying not to work in your bedroom, so trying to have that separation between personal and business. And I know that's hard in some cases, but that's something you try to achieve. Obviously making sure the technology is working, because having that outage, making sure you've got a good connection for the internet so you can do your Zoom or your team calls effectively. Getting dressed for work, even if you're just going to be at home, because that just makes that differential. Looking at your nutrition to make sure you're properly feeding yourself and looking after yourself, grooming, getting ready, showering, all those things, treating it as if you're going to be going to work, but you're not. And then really just making sure you're keeping in touch with your manager and so on. And I talked before about this idea that some of the teams have done where they just have a Zoom channel going, even though they're not having a meeting, they just have it on. And so they can hear each other and see each other occasionally when they're working, but just to create that feeling of that team. So you've got this virtual set of desks that is what is like in the workplace, but you're just virtually creating this pod of desks that you're all working at. So we just put those things in place initially as a set of principles, and they're all on the hub. There's a set of COVID-19 resources for studying, working at home, and they include a whole lot of references for mindfulness and doing all these sorts of things. But there's also right at the back, there's a PowerPoint deck of 6 tips that we think people should try and aim for, which we think can really make a difference. But just making it really simple principles that anyone can try and do.
Yeah, and the beauty of starting a program in COVID is we haven't done it any other way before. So I don't know any better for that one. So we're just doing whatever Andrew says. But internally, we're actually going to start IEPs for our students. They won't be education plans. They will be individualized employment plans. And we're actually going to try and get the whole team to use them. And it is modeled off of another company, Ultranauts, that has always had remote work and always had people on the spectrum doing remote work. And so they just have systems in place already. And so we're sort of mimicking that, where everybody says how best I'm communicated with, how, what times of day I usually will answer, how long it takes me to answer an email, whether I like you to call me out if something's gone well or something's gone poorly, how best to interact. All that stuff is useful for everybody. So we're we're going to start it specifically with the students, and then also what kind of accommodations do they need, you know, what is their schedule like for school and all those things, so that we're really individualizing everything we're doing, but also trying to sort of universalize some of it across the whole team.
Nina, anything that you want to pop in here with on this question about working remotely?
Well, I don't really have that experience yet of working remotely. I've only really worked in person. That was last year. But yeah, I will say sometimes it can get difficult to motivate yourself when you're at home, I suppose.
I know somebody else who's worked remotely, if he can get his mic to work.
I'm not sure if that's. Wait,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
heard.
he's unmuted.
There it is. Honestly, yeah. Working from home was a rough transition for sure. Which I had to deal with that a little bit when I first moved into an off-campus house that wasn't immediately accessible for campus, to campus. But I had found solutions in that I could go elsewhere. And that was no longer an option when the pandemic hit. And so more or less exactly what Andrew said. I just took to a routine as best as I could. I got ready in the mornings. I dressed as though I were going to work. I tried to work somewhere else in the house other than my bedroom or wherever I hung out. And basically just didn't work where I played. And it helped a lot. It was still not the same, but it helped a lot as opposed to when I wasn't doing that. And it is also very important to be communicative with your coworkers and your supervisor as well.
Mm.
And like I was always communicating with my teammates during that time.
100%. Yeah, that's huge.
May I make a remark, because I was one that asked the question?
Yeah.
Please do.
Or no? It's okay.
You want to say
Okay.
yourself?
Oh, well, hi. My name is Alyssa. I'm a senior at the university. I'm very much so involved in a lot of different campus involvements in the university, from different committees, task forces, and like organizations on campus. And I am also like working remotely. And so I just kind of wanted to ask that question because I know that like executive functioning like has been relatively difficult for me at times. And I just thank you guys for making your contributions as I've been starting to do that recently, and it has been incredibly helpful. I've gotten a planner and I've like started to wake up earlier to try and like schedule out more of my day. I've not worked in my room for at least a week, so far so good. So I just appreciate the responses because they were very confirmational with the work that I'm doing now. So
Great. Well, I think in the interest of the hour that I asked our panelists to devote to us, we should wrap it up. I did, again, really sincerely want to thank Andrew and Teresa for taking the time to share with us here on campus what's happening elsewhere and how much is happening elsewhere and how excited we should all be about what is happening. And to thank Nina for disclosing here to us all and for the leadership that she has shown on campus, both in the SIGNA program and in the autism support group for autistic students. So thank you all very much. The meeting has been recorded and it will be available at the University Career Center's website once we get the captioning done. And the chat is also available. I'll be sure and save that. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you to the audience, and be well and be safe.
Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.